Imagine a world where Roman legions still march, where Latin is spoken from Britain to Baghdad, where the greatest empire in history never collapsed. Your life would be completely different. Let me show you how. Today we're exploring the most mind-bending alternate timeline in history. What if the Roman Empire never fell? What if it survived past 476 AD and kept growing for another 100 years? The answer will change everything you thought you knew about our world. The point of divergence. Let's set the stage. In our timeline, the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, when the Germanic chieftain Odoacer deposed the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus. But what if one crucial thing changed? What if Emperor Constantine had never moved the capital to Constantinople? What if Rome stayed united instead of splitting into East and West? Or what if the plague of Justinian never happened, allowing Rome to maintain its massive population and military strength? Pick any of these scenarios, and suddenly Rome doesn't fall. It adapts, it survives, and it keeps expanding. So, what does that world look like? No dark ages. Continuous technological progress. Here's the first massive difference. There would be no dark ages. None. The period from 500 to 1000 AD that saw Europe descend into chaos, lose literacy, and forget Roman engineering, that never happens. Instead, Roman aqueducts keep supplying water to massive cities. Roman roads keep expanding across continents. The advanced Roman concrete, which we only recently figured out how to replicate, continues to be used and improved. Think about this. Rome had indoor plumbing, central heating, surgical tools, and architectural knowledge that Europe wouldn't rediscover for 1,000 years. If Rome never fell, that technological momentum never stops. By the year 1000 AD, when our timeline was struggling through medieval feudalism, the Roman Empire in this alternate timeline might already have steam engines. Why? Because they already had the foundations. Hero of Alexandria invented a primitive steam engine in the 1st century AD, but it was never developed beyond a toy because slave labor was cheaper. Without the collapse, Roman engineers would have had centuries to refine these inventions. The printing press might arrive 500 years early. Eyeglasses, mechanical clocks, and advanced metallurgy all emerge earlier because you have a continuous, stable civilization focused on innovation rather than survival. One language, one culture, a unified world. In our world, Latin fragmented into French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, and Romanian. In this alternate timeline, everyone from Britain to Mesopotamia speaks Latin, or perhaps a more evolved form, Classical Latin evolving into something like Imperial Latin over centuries. This has massive implications. There's no language barrier across most of the known world. A merchant from Britannia can do business in Egypt without a translator. A scholar in Gaul can read books written in Syria without translation. Scientific knowledge spreads instantly across the entire empire. Compare this to our timeline, where the fall of Rome created linguistic isolation. It took until the 1400s before European scholars could even read ancient Greek texts because that knowledge was lost in Western Europe. In the no-fall timeline, there's no loss of knowledge. Everything builds continuously. The cultural unity is staggering. Instead of dozens of competing European kingdoms, you have one unified Roman identity. But here's where it gets interesting. This Roman identity would be far more diverse than the original. As the empire expanded into Africa, Asia, and eventually discovering the Americas, Roman culture would absorb and blend with every civilization it encountered. Christianity takes a different path. Christianity still emerges, but its development is radically different. Without the fragmented medieval kingdoms, the church doesn't become the dominant power in Europe because the Roman state never weakens enough to allow it. Instead of the Pope crowning kings and wielding political power, Christianity remains more like it was in the early empire, one of many religions under Roman authority. The emperor might convert to Christianity like Constantine did, but the religion itself becomes thoroughly Romanized. There's no Protestant Reformation because there's no Catholic Church as we know it. There's no Crusades because the Islamic expansion either never happens or gets stopped immediately by Roman legions. The entire religious history of the world changes. Religious tolerance might actually be better in this timeline. Rome historically allowed conquered peoples to keep their religions as long as they paid taxes and didn't rebel. So, instead of religious wars tearing Europe apart for centuries, you might have a more pluralistic society where multiple faiths coexist under Roman law. Rome discovers the Americas first. Here's where it gets really wild. With continuous technological progress and no dark ages, Rome develops advanced shipbuilding and navigation centuries early. Roman explorers might reach the Americas by 800 or 900 AD, 600 years before Columbus. And when they do, they bring with them the full might of an empire that's been refining conquest, administration, and integration for 1,500 years. The impact on Native American civilizations would be profound. Instead of the chaotic Spanish conquistadors arriving in the 1500s, you have Roman legions arriving with superior organization, but also Roman pragmatism. Rome historically preferred to integrate conquered peoples rather than genocide them. It was more profitable to collect taxes than to destroy populations. The Aztecs, Mayans, and Incas might become Roman provinces, their gods added to the Roman pantheon, their people gradually Romanized over generations. The death toll from disease would still be catastrophic. Nothing prevents smallpox and measles from devastating populations with no immunity, but the political outcome would be very different. Instead of Latin American countries speaking Spanish and Portuguese, they speak Latin. Instead of Catholic culture, they have Roman culture. The entire Western Hemisphere develops as an extension of Rome. Islam and the Middle East. The rise of Islam in the 7th century faces a very different world. Instead of fragmented Byzantine and Persian empires weakened by decades of war, Muhammad's followers encounter a unified Roman Empire at the height of its power. The early Islamic expansion that conquered the Middle East, North Africa, and Spain in our timeline, in this timeline, it slams into the Roman war machine and likely stops cold. Roman legions have had centuries to perfect their craft, and they're defending territory that's been Roman for 700 plus years. One of two things happens. Either Islam remains confined to Arabia, or Roman military might forces a negotiated peace that creates defined borders. There might be centuries of border wars, but the massive Islamic conquests that reshape the Mediterranean world probably don't happen. This means no Moorish Spain, no Ottoman Empire, and a Middle East that remains culturally and politically Roman or Roman-influenced. The entire history of the region completely changes. Technology leaps forward. Let's talk about what technology looks like by the year 1500 AD in this timeline. Remember, you've had 1,000 years of continuous progress instead of the Dark Ages setback. The printing press exists by 1000 AD. Gunpowder weapons are refined by 1200 AD. Steam engines are powering Roman factories by 1300 AD. By 1500 AD, when our timeline is just entering the Renaissance, the Roman Empire might be starting an industrial revolution. Imagine Roman steam trains connecting Britain to Rome, to Egypt to India. Imagine Roman factories mass-producing goods. Imagine an empire of 500 million people with literacy rates of 80% because books are cheap and education is standardized. The scientific method develops earlier because you have institutional support for research. Roman universities in every major city are pushing the boundaries of knowledge. Medicine advances faster. Roman doctors building on Galen's work for 100 years would have discovered germ theory, developed better surgical techniques, and maybe even stumbled onto antibiotics through systematic experimentation. No world wars, but also no democracy. Here's the dark side. A Roman Empire that survives into the modern era is probably not a democracy. Rome was never democratic. It was an autocratic empire, with emperors wielding absolute power. Over centuries, you might see reforms. Maybe the Senate gains more power. Maybe provinces get more autonomy. But the fundamental structure would remain imperial. One person or one family at the top, with a massive bureaucracy administering an empire spanning multiple continents. This prevents the chaotic nationalism that led to World War I and II. There's no Germany, no France, no Britain as separate nations with competing interests. There's just Rome, and whatever rivals exist beyond its borders. But it also means no American Revolution, no French Revolution, no spread of democratic ideals. The concepts of individual rights, representative government, and citizen participation in politics might never fully develop because they were born from the chaos of post-Roman Europe. You might live in a world of unprecedented peace, prosperity, and technological advancement, but also a world where you have no vote, no freedom of speech, and no ability to challenge imperial authority. The modern Roman Empire, fast forwards, warred to today, 25 AD. What does a Roman Empire that's been continuously operating for 2,500 years look like? It's the only superpower. There's no United States, no European Union, no separate nations as we know them. Just Rome and its provinces spanning 6 continents. Latin is the global language. Everyone learns it in school, uses it for business, and watches Roman entertainment media in it. Local languages might survive in homes and regional culture, but Latin is universal. Technology is probably more advanced than our timeline because you've had uninterrupted progress for 2,000 years. They might already have fusion power, routine space travel, and medical technology that seems like science fiction to us. But society is also more stratified. Roman class systems, patricians, equites, plebeians, and whatever new classes emerge, define your opportunities. Social mobility exists, but within the framework of Roman hierarchy. The emperor might be selected by a senate of provincial governors, or perhaps genetic engineering ensures the imperial family produces capable rulers. The empire is too large for one person to micromanage, so it's divided into super provinces, each administered by a governor with near absolute authority within their region. What we lost and gained. So, is this alternate world better or worse? The answer is complicated. We gained continuous technological progress, no dark ages, no devastating world wars, unified scientific advancement, environmental management on a global scale, and unprecedented peace and stability. We lost national self-determination, democratic government, cultural diversity from independent nations, the dynamism of competing civilizations, and possibly individual freedom as we understand it. The Roman Empire's strength was always its ability to absorb and integrate conquered peoples, but its weakness was autocracy and eventual corruption. A Rome that never fell would have to somehow solve the problem that killed it in our timeline. How do you maintain good governance across vast distances over many generations? Maybe they solve it through technology. Advanced communications keeping the empire connected. Maybe through bureaucratic reforms that prevent corruption. Maybe through cultural evolution that makes Roman identity flexible enough to encompass the entire human race. The butterfly effect is massive. Remember, we're just scratching the surface. Every single person alive today wouldn't exist in this timeline. Your parents never meet because their ancestors' lives took completely different paths. Maybe your surname is a Latin name. Maybe you're descended from a Roman family that's been in the same province for 1,500 years. The books never written, the inventions never made, the wars never fought, and all the books, inventions, and conflicts that happened instead. It's impossible to fully calculate all the changes, but they touch literally everything about human civilization. Payoff section, the fall of Rome was one of its most important events in human history, precisely because it happened. It created the chaotic, competitive, diverse world that eventually produced democracy, nation-states, and the modern age. A Rome that never fell would give us a completely alien world, perhaps more advanced technologically, perhaps more stable politically, but fundamentally different in every way. Whether that's better or worse depends on what you value: stability or freedom, unity or diversity, continuous progress or dynamic change. If your mind is blown right now, hit that subscribe button because we're diving into more alternate history scenarios that will change how you see the world. What if Germany won World War II? What if the Mongols conquered Europe? What if the Americas were never discovered? Drop a comment. Would you rather live in our timeline or the never-fell Roman Empire? I genuinely want to know. History's greatest lesson is that everything could have been different. Thanks for joining me on this journey through an alternate timeline. I'll see you in the next one.